Love you. Morning. Yeah, I needed coffee. I won't start reading early or anything because that's not fair to other people, but I just wanted to make my coffee, you know, so. I was thirsty, needed my coffee, and all that jazz. I accidentally woke up Secret Husband by not talking, if you can believe that. He came out just now because he was like, oh, I thought it was late. And I was like, why? He was like, because I didn't hear you talking. So my not talking woke him up. Which is pretty funny if you ask me. Oh no. Now that I have the full features of going live, now people can request to be on my live, and I don't like that. He said, book club's gotta be over. She's not talking at all. That's right. Yeah, I was like, no, it's early. It's early. That was pretty funny, right? It was very cute. He was like, oh, I thought it was time to start work. I was like, no, not time to start work. Morning, Ray. Not time to start work. It's still early. I just needed my coffee, you know? I'm all caught up on reading Prince of Oregon. I loved it. Aw, thank you. There will be more parts to the audio, video part of it this week still. So, you know, I told everyone, you know, it's going to be a process. It's not going to be a fast process per se, but they will all get done eventually. And as long as we get at least a couple a week, I think we're making progress. You know what I mean? So that's good. But I appreciate you listening to it. Morning. I appreciate everyone who's already got it. I was surprised. I'm a guinea pig ant this week. A guinea pig ant? What is that? Oh, like an ant of a guinea pig, not like a guinea pig of an ant. I don't know what I'm talking about. Guinea pig and watching Minnie's guinea pig for her. So you're a guinea pig great aunt, actually, because you're not the guinea pig's aunt. It's not your sister's guinea pig. It's your niece's guinea pig. So you are a great guinea pig aunt. Wild times up in here. Wild times. How many books do you have going right now? Like to read or to write? Good morning, Anya. To read and listen to. So I always have one audiobook that I'm listening to. I always have our book club book. Hey, Renee. And then I have at least one book that I'm reading on Kindle. And sometimes if I get like bored, I'll jump to another book on Kindle. So sometimes I have a couple open on Kindle at the same time. But there's always like 3 going at the same time. One audio, one book club, one Kindle book, kind of all going at the same time. I just finished one. Thank you for the new follow. I just finished a book this morning called Sold Out. I tagged the author. I follow her here and on Instagram. I found her in a book group on Facebook, actually. It's a book about country music singers. It's a romance. It's good. It was good. I liked it. I'm listening to One Last Stop. How do you choose which to listen to and which to read? That's a great question. Some things aren't available on audiobook, of course, so that makes the choice for me. But then, like, it also depends on the audiobook reader. There's some voices that I really can't stand. And then also, there's some that are just really fun to listen to. Like, I don't like listening to sad things. I want to listen to something fun and uplifting while I'm working. You know, I always think I'm done with coffee for the day, but I get phone whenever I come. Yeah, you know what? Make more. I listen to audiobooks kind of all day while I'm working, and so I need it to be something that's not going to bring me down, you know? So that's part of it as well. Allie Hazelwood is really great to listen to while you work, in my opinion. I really love listening to all her books during the workday. It's easy to listen to, and she's fun, and the voices are always good. So A+ for Allie Hazelwood. I go back and forth with Emily Henry. Sometimes I listen to them, sometimes I read them. I guess it just depends. It also sometimes depends on what comes up first on Libby. Like if I know I want to read a book, sometimes I will put them, both the audio and the physical book, on hold on Libby, and whichever one becomes available first, I'll either listen or read it. You know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know. So that is the story. Hey, you just listen to Book Lovers. I love Book Lovers. Morning Sloth. Book Lovers might be my favorite Emily Henry book so far. I get that. I just listened to It Ends With Us and Begins With Us. I kind of want to read those before the movie, but the movie comes out so soon. I don't know if I'll have time. Hey, Jen. I hope so, though, because I'm really excited about that movie. I love the whole cast, basically. Looks like it's going to be a good one. 5 hours listening. What speed do you listen to it on, Tiffany? I listen at least 2-point speed, and if the audiobook reader is good, I can go up to 2.7. So I go through stuff pretty quickly. But it really depends on their voice. And how understandable they are, you know, their speeds. Look at that. 5 hours listening isn't bad. I mean, that's like not even a whole work day, you know, so. Hey, Amanda. All right. I really needed my coffee, you guys. That's why I came on early. My average is 2, but I can go up to 2. Yeah, it depends on the reader. Totally depends on the reader for me. Because if the audiobook reader doesn't enunciate super well, then you can't listen to it faster. You know? You just can't. Maybe because we started a little early, maybe we'll be able to finish the book today. Who knows? I don't know. What do you guys think? Maybe. Also, okay, so I listened to Tom Hanks's book earlier this month. I actually started in June, but it took me a while to get through it because it was a little bit of a slog. It was an okay book. It wasn't like my favorite. It wasn't my least favorite either. However, I didn't listen to his book so it had multiple audiobook readers, but when it was him reading, I listened to it in 1.5 or 1.75 because I genuinely like his voice, and he read it himself, and I wanted to hear his voice, so I wanted it to sound like that comforting, you know, he's Woody from our childhood, you know what I mean? So I kind of slowed down for that. So I guess it just depends. I put it up to 2 and above, and I could understand him. There was no problem with it. I just like hearing his voice in its regular timbre, you know? Yeah, I think if you like someone's voice, it's a choice. It's a choice you have to make. Whatever speaks to you. I wonder what I would sound like sped up. I don't even know. Does anyone listen to my videos on the 2 times speed that TikTok allows? It's probably okay, right? But I speak pretty quickly naturally, so I don't know. Maybe it would be too much to speed me up. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure. I have to try it. Good morning, Amy. All right, let's get into it because we are going into the depths of doom, quite literally. Why is this? The sun is in an awful spot right now. But let's go into the depths of doom. We are on chapter 23. Chapter 23 is called A War of Fire, Ice, and Alchemy. Collective deep breath, everybody, before we go into this war, because we are literally entering a war. Yeah, I do speak pretty quickly. All right, here we go. Curfew or no curfew, the citizens of Chariot Hills were getting out. Shortly after midnight, everyone in the capital was awoken by the thunderous blasts of cannons being fired in the town square. The citizens peeked out their windows to see what was causing the commotion, and they were astonished to see that the Alchemy Institute was floating above their heads. However, their shock quickly turned to terror when they saw the army of the dead attacking the campus with harpoons. In a matter of minutes, the sleepy capital had turned into a dangerous battleground. The citizens began to panic, knowing that if they didn't leave Chariot Hills straight away, they might not survive until morning. While the streets became chaotic with fleeing citizens, the army of the dead continued their ambush on the Alchemy Institute. The dead soldiers reeled in the chains of their harpoons until all 13 facilities slammed down in the town square. Upon impact, the clouds beneath the campus completely vaporized. The alchemists were still stationed on the balcony below the Grand Armillary Sphere, and they watched in horror as the skeleton army marched toward the town square and crept toward the Institute. "They've surrounded us," Dr. Steam cried. "How are we going to stop them?" Dr. Storm asked. "We're scientists, not soldiers," Dr. Stage said. Dr. States didn't seem nearly as distraught as his colleagues. The alchemist observed the approaching enemy like he was looking down on an opponent's chess pieces. He tapped his cane on the ground 3 times, and all the magbots along the perimeter of the campus linked arms and formed a protective barrier around the Institute. The magbots won't hold them off for long, Dr. Strand said. "The soldiers outnumber them 10 to 1, Dr. Stats said. The magbots aren't supposed to stop the soldiers, Dr. State said. "They're merely a distraction while we get our troops ready." But sir, we don't have an army, Dr. Starr said. "But of course we do," Dr. States grumbled. "Stop being a scientist for just 1 minute and use your imagination. We have the greatest army the world has ever seen, right at our fingertips. Everyone, report to your department at once and wait for my commands. The army of the dead may outnumber us, but we can outsmart them. Now go." The alchemists dispersed and hurried to their departments. Across the town square, on the roofs of the righteous palace, the righteous emperor was perched on a cushy throne being served wine and dessert as he watched the battle begin. The clansmen of the righteous brotherhood cheered the army of the dead on like they were observing a sporting match. High Commander, send for the champagne, Seven ordered. "This battle's gonna be finished before we know it." And from what he could see, the righteous emperor had good reason to feel victorious. His army of the dead had pelted the magbots with their swords and shields, denting and bending their metal limbs. Eventually, the dead soldiers hacked their way through the magical robots and broke through their perimeter. Once all the skeletons were past the magbots, the dead soldiers raced toward the Institute with nothing to stop them. Or so they thought. Dr. States glared at the approaching army. "You heathens have already broken the laws of nature," he said under his breath. "But now let's see what you do against the laws of physics." The alchemist tapped his cane on the floor 3 times, and the doors of the physics department burst open.
Thousands of bright red balls and hundreds of yellow yo-yos, dozens of magnets, all came rolling out of the facility and crashed onto the oncoming soldiers. The red balls bounced off the skeletons' bodies, knocking off fingers and toes. Yellow yo-yos wrapped their strings around the soldiers' feet and tripped them as they ran. The magnets magnetized the skeletons' armor, causing them to slam into one another and stick together. The righteous emperor scoffed at the Institute's first wave of defense. The scientists are putting up a bigger fight than I predicted, Seven said, but they're gonna need more than children's toys to defeat us. Dr. Strand, release the microorganisms, Dr. States commanded, his voice echoing through the Institute. The biologist kicked open the doors of the biology department, and a stampede of gigantic cells, viruses, and bacteria charged toward the army. White blood cells gobbled up the dead soldiers and held them prisoner in their nuclei. Neurons thrashed their long bodies like whips and wrapped themselves around the skeletons. Viruses rolled through the army, infecting each of the soldiers that they touched, and the skeletons' joints became too achy to move. A small bacterium was cornered by a dozen dead soldiers, but the bacterium began multiplying and quickly outnumbered them. The righteous emperor spit out his wine as he witnessed the microorganisms devouring his army. That's just beginner's luck, Seven said with a cocky laugh. This battle's gonna be more entertaining than we thought. Dr. Storm, please release the weather, Dr. States instructed. The meteorology department's umbrella roof rose like the lid of a tea kettle, and several miniature storms erupted from inside. Tornadoes spun across the Institute, sucking the soldiers into their vortexes. A miniature hurricane blew through the army, tossing the skeletons across the city with powerful winds. Dark clouds hovered over the soldiers, drenching them with rain and striking them with lightning. Blizzards chased the skeleton across the campus and froze their feet to the ground. The righteous emperor and the clansmen were growing more nervous by the second. That has to be it, right? Seven asked the clansmen. They can't possibly have any more up their sleeves. Dr. Stage, release the artifacts, Dr. States ordered. And Dr. Sting, release the swarms. The remains of a massive T-Rex, a woolly mammoth, and a dozen cavemen came running out from the anthropology department. The dinosaur flattened the dead soldiers with its enormous tail, and the mammoth smashed into them with its huge tusks. The cavemen beat them to the ground with their clubs. Next, the windows of the etymology department were flung open, and plagues of locust swarms and wasps, colonies of ants rained down on the dead soldiers. Oh. The locusts piled on top of the skeletons until they couldn't move. The wasps covered their bodies in nests, and the ants picked at their bones. Oh, it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. The righteous emperor growled angrily and ripped out handfuls of his hair. Shall I cancel the champagne, my lord? The high commander asked. We need more soldiers. Send every man we have, Seven yelled. No, sir, we don't have any more soldiers, the high commander said. Well, then fetch some crossbows and cannons, Seven ordered. The clansmen will attack from the roof. My lord, you armed the army of the dead with our entire arsenal, the high commander said. There are no more crossbows or cannons. The righteous emperor's eyes bulged, and the veins in his neck throbbed. He grabbed the high commander by the collar of his uniform and held him over the edge of the roof. Are you saying we have nothing left to defend ourselves with? Seven roared. Oh, we may have a couple of butter knives in the kitchen, the high commander peeped. My lord, a clansman said. Forgive the interruption, but we might have a bigger problem than the alchemists. Are you out of your mind? Seven screamed. What could possibly be bigger? The clansmen quickly parted to two sides of the roof so the righteous emperor could see for himself. While the clansmen had been fixating on the battle in town square, the eastern countryside had turned to a blazing inferno. The sky was covered in thick black smoke, and wildfires were spreading rapidly. And from what the righteous emperor could see, it appeared that the flames were headed straight towards them. What the devil is that? He seethed. No good. No good. We're still in the same chapter, but apparently a new scene. Bristol, Lucy, Ryder, and Gobzella soared over the northeastern ocean aboard Kitty's back. Ryder steered the dragon southwest toward the kingdoms and the territories. She flew as fast as her wings could carry them. The continent eventually appeared on the horizon, and the dragon flew above the board border between the northern and eastern kingdoms as she descended toward the city of Ironhand. We should try to touch down in 20 minutes, Ryder told the others. They were so high in the sky that the delegates could see for hundreds of miles in each direction, and as Bristol scanned the cold northern mountains to her right, she suddenly screeched. Not because of something she saw, but because of something she didn't see. What's wrong? Lucy asked. Did you see a gremlin on the wing or something? No, she said. Look. Bristol pointed toward the northern mountains in a panic. I don't see anything, Lucy said. Exactly, Bristol said. The northern lights are gone. The girls were horrified, but their friends didn't understand. What's so special about northern lights? Gobzella asked. The northern lights mark the presence of the Snow Queen, Lucy explained. As long as they're in the sky, it means the Snow Queen is trapped in the northern mountains. If no northern lights not in sky, Gobzella asked. It means she's escaped, Bristol said. Ryder did a double take. I'm sorry. Who's the Snow Queen? Lucy rolled her eyes. Boy, you really need to get out more, she said. Everyone aboard the dragon suddenly went quiet, and their attention was drawn to something rising straight out of the southern horizon. A gargantuan cloud of thick black smoke was billowing up from the countryside, drifting across the full moon like a floating mountain. I have never seen so much smoke in my entire life, Ryder said, and I live on a volcano with dragons. That's not normal fire, Bristol said. That's the devil's breath. It's returned. Oh, no. Xanthos, Lucy said. He's gonna get blamed for this one, too. Change of plans, Bristol told the other. The Book of Sorcery can wait for another day. We've got to stop the fire before it spreads around the world, so follow that smoke. Immortalia triumphantly led the demons through the countryside and toward Chariot Hills. By 2 o'clock in the morning, they finally reached the outskirts of the capital, and Immortalia passed the fiery procession at the top of a high hill. From there, Immortalia could see the entire city below her. She was thrilled to discover the army of the dead was engaged in a heated battle with the Alchemy Institute. Well, 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 this is lucky, isn't it? Immortalia told the demons. We can get rid of the Righteous Empire and the Alchemy Institute in one shot? A wicked laugh erupted from Immortalia's mouth. This was the moment that she had been waiting for centuries, and finally she was going to get her revenge by attacking one of the greatest cities in the world, and nothing was standing in her way except for a few acres of farmland. Demons, burn that city to the ground, she ordered. The demons were magically compelled to follow her commands, and they headed toward the city. However, shortly after they began their approach, all the demons stopped in their tracks. Something very strange was hovering in the sky above them. A giant block of ice had appeared through the smoky haze as it was flown into the countryside. Each of their brooms was steered by a witch. Oh, sorry. The ice was hanging from 4 flying broomsticks. I missed a sentence. That hardly ever happens. I'm so sorry. The ice was hanging from 4 flying broomsticks, and each of the brooms was steered by a witch carrying a fairy passenger. What on earth is that? Immortalia asked. Put her down over there, Emerald instructed her friends. The witches gently set the block of ice down in the field between the demons and Chariot Hills. Once the ice was on the ground, the witches and the fairies hopped off the broomsticks and stood in a row behind it. From the hill, Immortalia could see the silhouette of something monstrous inside the ice. One glimpse of the creature's tall snowflake crown, and she knew exactly who it was. Well, aren't they clever? Immortalia muttered. They resurrected the Snow Queen to stop me, but they're gonna need more than a little ice to extinguish my fire. Demons, vaporize that frigid witch. The demons sprinted toward the block of ice, and the fairies and witches backed away. The demons formed a tight circle around the ice and pressed their flaming bodies against it. Steam surged into the night sky as ice melted at a rapid pace. Here we go, Emeralda told her friends. Remember to keep her focused on the fire and don't let her near the city. Suddenly, the entire countryside was in a blinding white flash. The demons surrounding the ice were blasted across the field, and when the light faded, the block of ice was gone. And the Snow Queen was awake. The witch let out a horrendous moan as she stretched her stiff body for the first time in 2 years. She gritted her rotten teeth and sniffed the smoky air, growled angrily like an animal recently released from a cage. Well, don't just stand there, Immortalia shouted. Demons, Destroy her! Although the Snow Queen was blind, she could feel the warmth emitting from the demons' bodies. The witch extended her right hand, and a brand new icicle scepter grew from her palm. The Snow Queen struck the ground with her scepter and sent a powerful frost in every direction. The cold breeze knocked the fairies, the witches, and the demons all off their feet. The frost spread across the countryside and instantly extinguished all the fires in the empire. Only the demons themselves were left ablaze. The fairies and the witches helped one another off the ground and stared at the Snow Queen in terror. She seems a little bit more powerful than she was before, Tangerina said. She's angrier, Emeralda said. Once the demons were back on their feet, they charged the witch again. The Snow Queen pointed her scepter at the ground, creating a thick wall of ice in their path. The demons slammed into the icy barrier, and their bodies were so warm that the ice didn't stay standing for long. The fairies and the witches were relieved as they watched the Snow Queen duel the demons. It's totally working, Skylene said. Yeah. Oh, she's stopped the fires and she's keeping them away from the city, Mrs. V added. Well, let's hope it stays that way, Emeralda said. The fairies and the witches felt a strong wind as something large swooped down from the sky. They looked up and they were shocked to see a massive dragon flying above their heads. But even more alarming was seeing 4 people who were riding the dragon. Bristol, the fairies gasped. Lucy, the witches cried. You're alive! All the girls cheered together. Kitty landed in the field behind the fairies and witches. Bristol, Lucy, Ryder, and Gobzella quickly climbed off the dragon's back. The fairies and the witches were so excited to see Bristol and Lucy that they tackled the girls to the ground. However, the happy reunion was cut short when the newcomers caught sight of the Snow Queen. Can someone tell me what she's doing here? Bristol asked. You first, Tangerina said. Where'd you get the dragon? Okay, that's a long story. We'll chat about that later, Lucy said. Did you get the Book of Sorcery? Emerald asked. No, someone already took it, Bristol said. Who? Skylene asked. Lucy gazed into the distance and dramatically pointed to the hill. As a matter of fact, she did, she announced. Wait, Princess Proxima has the Book of Sorcery? Mrs. V asked. No, that's not Princess Proxima, Bristol told them. That's Queen Immortalia. She's the immortal one. She took the Book of Sorcery from the Temple of Knowledge centuries ago. I know, the little witches being excited to see their Lucy is like the cutest thing ever because Lucy's their hero. It's precious. I'm obsessed with them. So that's the book she was reading from, Pip said. The Book of Sorcery must contain a spell that controls fire people. Wait, fire people? Lucy asked. Pip pointed in the direction of the demons battling the Snow Queen. Lucy and Bristol felt as if the wind had been knocked out of their lungs. There's fire moving like people? Lucy said. Yeah, it's pretty awesome, huh? Stitches said. Well, this proves that the Xanthos is innocent, BB said. We saw Proxima summon the fire in the countryside, Emeralda said. We were afraid that the fire was going to destroy the whole empire, so we went to the northern mountains and we brought back the Snow Queen. And Madame Weatherbury let you do that? Bristol asked. Are you kidding? She encouraged it, Tangerina said. And so far so good, Skylene said. Bristol was overwhelmed by all the information that her friends were giving her. Her eyes darted around the countryside from the Snow Queen to the Fire People to the Book of Sorcery, clutched tightly in Immortalia's arms while she plotted her next move. Okay. First things first, we have to get the Book of Sorcery away from Immortalia, Bristol said. There's a spell inside the book that can stop the Snow Queen and the fires. Yeah, and then we're gonna want to hurry, Lucy said. Looks like someone's about to beat us to it. The fairies and the witches looked up the hill where Immortalia was standing, and to their surprise, a chariot pulled by 4 enormous jackalopes was sneaking up behind her. They don't have to hurry. This is great news. The horned rabbits were steered by a young man in a black and white checkered armor while another young man stood behind him. Before Immortalia heard them coming, the chariot sped right past her, and the second young man snatched the Book of Sorcery right out of her hands. Yeah, Xanthos, you go and save the day. The fairies and the witches were overjoyed when they recognized the passenger. Xanthos, they cheered. Oh, he's all right, Tangerina said. And he's got the book, Skylene said. Wait, why does he want the book? Emeralda said. Who cares? Don't look a gift mallet in the mouth. Excuse me. Don't look a gift mallet in the beak, Lucy said. The immortal was enraged as she watched the elf and the fairy get away. "No!" she howled. "Demons, after them! Bring me back my book!" And upon her command, the demons abandoned the duel with the Snow Queen and chased after the chariot. The demon silhouettes changed from the shape of people into the shape of tigers. The fiery felines raced after the boys, and Elric steered the jackalopes in erratic loops to avoid being struck by the demons' flaming paws. "They need our help," Bristol told her friends. "Stitches, Sprout, Beebe, Pip, get on your brooms and try to get the book from Xanthos. Ryder and I will follow behind you. Emeralda, Tangerine, Skyline, and Mrs. V, you make sure that the Snow Queen doesn't leave the countryside. Lucy and Gobzella, you keep an eye on the immortal." Without a moment to lose, everyone separated to follow Bristol's instructions. The fairies lined up behind the Snow Queen. Lucy and Gobzella sped across the field toward Immortalia, and the witches hopped on their broomsticks and flew to Xanthos' aid. When the witches arrived, the demons were closing in on the chariot and ready to pounce. "Hey, Xanthos," Stitches called down. "I'm up here." Xanthos was surprised to see the witches following him from the air. What are you guys doing here?" he asked. "We're trying to help you," Sprout said.
"Toss the book of sorcery before the fires get you,"
Pip said. "Wait, this is the book of sorcery?" he asked. "Just pass us the dang book," Beebe said. Seconds before the demons were about to tackle the chariot, Xanthos threw the book of sorcery as high as he could, and Pip swooped through the air and caught the book with her skunk tail. Okay, I just have to pause for a second. Can we give Beebe some props? Because how hard must it be to be the one who has a stutter and is always trying to get people organized? Because she really tries. She's like, "You guys, this is what's real." She's always right, and she's got a stutter, so they're never listening to this poor girl. Seconds before the demons were about to tackle the chariot, Xanthos threw the book of sorcery as high as he could, and Pip swooped through the air and caught the book with her skunk tail. "Don't let them get away," Immortalia screamed from the hill. "Demons, you fly!" The demons changed their silhouettes again, and the fiery felines morphed into a flock of flaming hawks. The blazing birds soared after Pip, chasing her through the sky, and as the birds zeroed in on her, Pip quickly tossed the book of sorcery to Beebe. Force. The hawks abruptly changed course, but Beebe threw the book to Sprout before they got too close. Sprout covertly passed the book to Stitches as she zipped by, and the demons lost track of it. The witches exchanged the book of sorcery from Beebe to Sprout, from Sprout to Pip, from Pip back to Beebe, from Beebe to Stitches, and the demons became confused. Eventually, the demons caught wind of what was happening and followed the book back as it returned to Stitches. The hawks surrounded Stitches in midair and blocked her from passing it to the other witches. "Stitches, to your left!" Kitty did a barrel turn through the air, and the dragon blew the demons across the sky with the powerful wind that her massive wings created. Stitches saw Bristol and Ryder riding on Kitty's back, and she tossed them the book of sorcery. The dragon soared higher and higher, but the demons relentlessly followed. Bristol tried to zap the hawks with her wand, but there were just too many for her to fight on her own. "Bristol, down here!" Xanthos called from the ground. "I know how to stop the demons." "Demons?" Bristol asked. "It's a long story," he said. "Toss me the book." Bristol dropped the book of sorcery, and it plummeted toward the earth. Xanthos dived to the ground and caught it in his arms. The demons immediately did a sharp turn and skyrocketed after the book. As the hawks flew straight toward him, Xanthos quickly flipped through the pages of the book, but the entire book was written in a language that he didn't understand. "Which page has the oath?" Xanthos cried. "Are there any words that you recognize?" Elric asked him. "No," Xanthos said. "What do I do?" As the boys frantically searched through the book, they noticed each passage included a sketch. There were images of tons of skeletons, newborn babies, a full moon, a bright sun, flowers, weeds, and every animal and insect in existence. "Okay, ignore the words and focus on the illustrations," Elric said. "They should give you a hint about what each passage means." Xanthos found an illustration of a throne surrounded by fire. He showed it to Elric, and the boys looked at each other with the same wide-eyed expression. This had to be it. Above them, the demons were descending faster and faster, and Xanthos took a deep breath, reading the passage from the book of sorcery, praying that it was the oath of the demon king. "Demonias carta, demonias marta, demonias infante, and demonis triante." Xanthos and Elric threw their arms around each other, expecting to be hit with thousands of flaming hawks at once. However, instead of landing on top of the boys, the demons landed in a circle around them, and as each demon hit the ground, they took the shape of a person again. Xanthos slipped out of Elric's arms and floated into the air. His eyes started to glow and a golden crown appeared, hovering over his head like an angel's halo, and a long cape of fire grew down his back like the wings of a phoenix. It's totally working, Elric cheered. You did it, Xanthos. The demons were finally freed from Immortalia's spell, and they knelt before their new leader. Kitty landed beside the demons. Bristol and Ryder stared at Xanthos in astonishment. What is happening to him? Bristol asked. Why is the fire bowing to him? Because he's the new Demon King, Elric said. Ryder did a double take. Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you say Demon King? Okay, this time I'm just as confused as you are, Bristol said. Xanthos landed gently on the ground and looked at his crown and cape in awe. How do I look? He asked. Like you were born for this, Elric said with a smile. Before Bristol had a chance to ask any more questions, Immortalia appeared out of nowhere and sprinted right past her. The Immortal yanked the Book of Sorcery out of Xanthos' hand and then ran off in the opposite direction. I know, Ryder's so precious. What a sweet little baby child. You sweet, sweet morning child. I won't let you ruin this for me, Immortalia yelled over her shoulder. I've waited too long to let you take it from... Not so fast, you evil old lady. Gobzella and Lucy jumped in front of Immortalia and she slammed into the goblin's muscular body like it was a brick wall. As Immortalia fell backwards, Lucy hit the ground with her fist and a sinkhole appeared behind her. The Immortal rolled into the hole and hit the bottom of it with a hard thump. Immortalia moaned and groaned as she tried to climb out, but the sides of the hole were too steep and she was trapped. You'll pay for this, Immortalia screamed. Yeah, send us a bill, Lucy said. Gobzella reached into the hole and pulled the Book of Sorcery out of the Immortal's hands with ease. Hey, heads up, fairy godmother, the goblin said and tossed it to her. Bristol couldn't believe that she was holding the Book of Sorcery. Everything the fairies needed to defeat the army of the dead was finally in her hands. She flipped through its ancient parchment pages, and as with Xanthos, the illustrations helped her guess what each passage was intended for. She assumed the sketch of the wilted flowers was a spell to disarm. A sketch of the skull was a spell to destroy, and the sketch of a newborn baby was a spell to resurrect. Unfortunately, Bristol was just as devastated as she was relieved, and now that the Book of Sorcery was in her possession, her friends would expect her to kill the Immortal, and Bristol would be forced to be disappointed. Oh yeah, I'll put it up. Don't worry, Sloth. Don't worry, Sloth. Bristol would be forced to disappoint them. All right, what are you waiting for? Lucy asked. The Immortal's right in front of you. Knock her old dusty lights out while you have the chance. Bristol turned toward Lucy with tears in her eyes and slowly shook her head. I can't, she confessed. Lucy was flabbergasted. What? She asked. But you have to, or you'll die. I would rather die than spend the rest of my life feeling like a murderer, Bristol said. You can't be serious, Lucy said. This woman just tried to fry the whole world. She doesn't deserve to live, but you do. But I don't want to live with the guilt of taking another life, Bristol said. Please, understand that. The girls were sidetracked by the sound of screaming. They looked across the field and they were reminded that the battle was only half over. Esmeralda, Tangerina, Skyline, and Mrs. V were desperately trying to block the Snow Queen from entering Chariot Hills, but the witch was too powerful. Esmeralda had surrounded her in tall emerald pillars, but the Snow Queen demolished them with icy blasts from her scepter. Tangerina tried to stick the witch to the grass, but the Snow Queen froze the fairies' bumblebees before they got close enough to douse her with honey. Skyline hit the witch with a geyser of water, but the water froze upon contact and shattered to the ground. Mrs. V pelted the witch's head with a whole set of saucers, which greatly annoyed the Snow Queen, but it did nothing to delay her. The Snow Queen waved her scepter and froze the fairies in giant blocks of ice. A raspy cackle erupted from deep within the witch's throat as she entered Chariot Hills and disappeared from Bristol's sight. Demons, thaw out my friends, Xanthos ordered, and please hurry. While the demons raced to save the fairies, both Bristol and Lucy knew their discussion about the Immortal would have to wait. We have to stop the Snow Queen, Bristol cried. Yet that doesn't mean that this conversation is over, Lucy said. Gobzella, you stay here and make sure that Immortalia doesn't move, Bristol said. Ryder, I need you and Kitty to take me to the city. Fast. Does anyone know what time it is? I forgot to put my watch on. What time is it? What time is it? Showtime. It's 8:56. Okay, should we do one more? All right, let's do it. We can do one more. Chapter 24. The fiery farewell. The righteous emperor's luck was starting to change. Outside the city, the wildfires had miraculously been extinguished by unexpected frost, and inside the city, the army of the dead was finally gaining ground in their battle against the alchemists. No matter how many times the dead soldiers were knocked down by red balls, or trapped by enormous white blood cells, or electrocuted by lightning, the skeletons always got back to their feet. Eventually, all the robots, magnets, and microorganisms, storms, artifacts, and insects had been released, and all the alchemists were running out of ways to defend themselves. The skeletons blocked the entrance to all 13 departments, trapping the alchemists inside the facility. "It's over, Dr. States," Seven called from the rooftop of the Righteous Palace. "Surrender now, and I promise to give you and your colleagues a swift execution." "You may destroy us, but you'll never destroy what we stand for," Dr. States called back. "No matter how much hatred you spread, no matter how many lies you tell, no matter how many history books you rewrite, science is truth, and you cannot defeat truth." "Yeah, we'll see about that," Seven sneered. "Guards, finish him off." And just as the army of the dead was about to storm inside the Alchemy Institute, a brisk chill blew through the air. The temperature dropped so significantly that the dead soldiers' jaws began chattering, and the Righteous Emperor and the Reich's Brotherhood shivered as they searched the town square to find whatever was causing the cold. "Why is the air freezing?" Seven asked his men. "I don't know, my lord," the High Commander said. It must be them." He pointed to the alchemists, but the scientists were just as confused as the clansmen. "Dr. Storm, is this your doing?" Dr. States asked. "Don't look at me," the meteorologist said. "My blizzards are all out of ice." A few moments later, the clansmen and the scientists had their answer. For the first time all night, they were all united by fear. The Snow Queen crept down in an alleyway and emerged toward town square, freezing the cobblestone under her feet as she walked. "The Snow Queen," the High Commander gasped. "She's returned." "Guards, obliterate that witch," Seven ordered. The army of the dead left the Alchemy Institute and surrounded the Snow Queen. The witch could hear the skeleton approaching and could smell their decaying bones, but she couldn't feel their cold bodies as easily as she could sense the demons. The dead soldiers loaded their crossbows and fired a round of bloodstone toward the Snow Queen. The witch shielded herself with a wall of ice, but the arrows zipped right through her magic and penetrated her frostbitten skin. The Snow Queen screamed in agony as the arrows sticking to her shoulders and legs. "Well done," Seven cheered. "Now aim for her heart." The Snow Queen pointed her scepter toward the sound of the Righteous Emperor's voice, and an icy blast erupted from the tip of her scepter. It froze Seven and all the clansmen standing on the roof. The men moaned as they tried to break through the ice covering their bodies, but it was too thick and they couldn't move a muscle. The army of the dead reloaded their crossbows and fired arrows again, this time piercing the witch's back and stomach. The Snow Queen wailed as black blood oozed from her wounds and ran down her body. The witch waved her scepter in a giant circle, freezing the skeletons nearby, but there were still hundreds more to go. Kitty swooped down from the sky, carrying Ryder and Bristol aboard her back. Bristol gasped when she saw the dead soldiers pelting the witch with arrows. If the skeletons killed the Snow Queen, then Madame Weatherberry would be slaughtered in the process. "Get me as close to the Snow Queen as you can," Bristol told Ryder. He gripped the dragon's reins and steered Kitty toward the center of the town. The dragon landed next to the Snow Queen, rattling the institute upon impact. The alchemists were flabbergasted to see the creature. "Sir, the fairy godmothers returned with a dragon," Dr. Stone shouted. Dr. States was more interested in the book that Bristol was holding. "My God," he said. "She did it. She got the book of sorcery." What should we do, sir?" Dr. Straight asked. "There's nothing we can do," Dr. State said. "It's all up to her now." The army of the dead continued firing bloodstone arrows at the Snow Queen. Bristol flipped open the book of sorcery and turned to the page with a sketch of a skull. She pointed her wand at the skeletons and recited the passage as loudly as she could. "Illuminus, pardonimus, mortanimus, pardonimus." An eerie silence fell over the town square, and at first Bristol worried that she had read the passage wrong. But then, as if life was being sucked out of the skeletons, a thick black smoke expelled from each soldier's body, and the smoke rose into the sky, spinning like a cyclone of chaotic beasts, and then disappeared into the light of the full moon. One by one, the soldiers dropped their weapons and collapsed into a pile of bones. This time, the army of the dead didn't get back up to their feet. Seven growled. The Righteous Emperor's precious army had been destroyed right in front of his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Seven was so enraged that his body temperature skyrocketed, and the ice coating him began to melt. Although his mouth was covered, his furious screams echoed through the town square. "It's over, Seven," Bristol said. "You lost." Lucy, Xanthos, and Elric ran into the town square, and the fairies and witches followed them. The group was shocked by all the destruction throughout the town square, especially the battered institute. However, their uneasiness quickly turned into euphoria once they noticed the pile of bones around them. "They're gone," Emeralda said, tears filling her eyes. "The army of the dead is finally gone." The fairies and the witches cheered and embraced one another. Bristol wanted to join her friends in celebration, but the Snow Queen was still at large. She opened the book of sorcery to the page with wilted flowers and began to read the passage beside it, eager to put the end to the Snow Queen's reign of terror once and for all. "Infernus Infanta Infernus del... Bristol, look out!" Lucy shouted. Before Bristol could turn around, she was hit by a powerful blow. The Snow Queen had propelled her, Ryder, and Kitty across town square with an icy blast. The dragon crashed through the glass wall of the botany department and landed among the plants. Bristol and Ryder hit the side of the astrology department and were held in place by a sheet of ice. The book of sorcery was frozen to a wall above Bristol's head, just a few feet out of reach. Bristol struggled against the ice trapping her, but Ryder didn't move. The blow had knocked him unconscious. "Ryder, are you hurt?" she asked, but he didn't respond. The Snow Queen pulled the arrows from her body and then loomed toward Bristol with her scepter raised, and just as the witch was about to strike Bristol with another powerful blow, the Snow Queen was hit in her wounded shoulder by a ball of fire. "You leave her alone," Xanthos yelled. The Snow Queen jerked her head toward the sound of Xanthos' voice. The witch pointed her scepter in his direction and a massive blast erupted from the tip. Xanthos raised his hand to protect himself and his friends with a shield of fire. However, the Snow Queen's icy blast stayed steady, and Xanthos struggled to keep up his shield. "She's too powerful. I can't hold this forever," Xanthos cried. "Well, don't just stand there. Ask your new friends for help," Lucy said. "Oh, yeah, good idea. Demons, I could use a hand here." His command summoned the demons to town square, and the fiery people grew up from the ground all around him. The demons pressed their flaming bodies into Xanthos' shield, which strengthened the barrier, but unfortunately, even with the demons' help, they couldn't hold off the Snow Queen's magic. Bristol fought against the ice, pinning her to the astrology department, and the sheet of ice started to crack. Eventually, the ice chipped away, and Bristol wriggled out from underneath it. She pointed her wand at the book of sorcery, intending to free it from the ice, but the sound of stomping caught her off guard. Kitty emerged from the botany department, covered from head to toe in scrapes and leaves. The dragon roared furiously as she crept toward the Snow Queen, and the smoke rose from her nostrils. The witch was so fixated on destroying Xanthos that she didn't notice the giant creature sneaking up behind her. Kitty took a deep breath, and a fiery geyser erupted from her mouth. "No!" Bristol screamed. She pointed her wand at the Snow Queen and created a protective bubble around the witch. Kitty didn't understand why her fire wasn't reaching the witch, and she tried again. The dragon took a deeper breath, and an even stronger geyser shot out of her mouth. "Ryder, please wake up," Bristol said. "You have to tell Kitty to back off." Ryder moaned as he stirred back to consciousness, but his eyes remained closed. The dragon's breath was so forceful that it was hard for Bristol to stay on her feet, let alone keep her wand in position. The more time that passed, the weaker that Bristol's bubble became, and the Snow Queen was only getting stronger. Her icy blast backed the demons, the fairies, and the witches up against the righteous palace. They were trapped. "Bristol, lower your wand." The calm voice caught Bristol by surprise. She looked over her soldier and saw that Madame Weatherberry had appeared beside her. "I can't," she said. "If I lower my wand, that dragon will kill the Snow Queen." "I know," the fairy said. "I want the Snow Queen to die." But you'll die with her." Madame Weatherberry nodded somberly. "It's time for the Snow Queen's story to end," she said, "and mine with it." Bristol thought her ears were deceiving her. She couldn't have heard the fairy correctly. "No, Madame Weatherberry, you cannot die," she said. "I only have 7 days left to live. The fairies are going to need you when I'm gone." "They won't need me, because you aren't going anywhere," the fairy said. "Yes, I am. I made a deal with death." "Yes, but I also made a deal with death," Madame Weatherberry said. "When you told me you weren't going to kill the immortal, I couldn't just sit back and let you die. I reached out to death, and I made him an offer. I convinced him that as long as the Snow Queen remained in the ice, she and I would also be immortal. Having more than one immortal in the world didn't sit well with him, and he agreed to spare you in exchange for us. So, I immediately began defrosting the Snow Queen ever so slightly until she began to slowly suffocate in the ice. Just before she and I crossed over, your friends arrived and asked for my help. Now, here we are, but it's up to you to finish the job. Bristol was so overwhelmed that she started losing her grip on her wand. No, she said, I could never hurt you. Bristol, there's no time to argue, Madame Weatherbury said. Your friends are in trouble. The Snow Queen is much more powerful than she was before. She has 2 years of anger built up inside her, and this time I can't help you fight her. This may be your only chance to destroy her for good. Bristol shook her head and tears spilled down her face. Please don't make me do this, she cried. I don't want to kill you. You aren't killing me. You're setting me free, the fairy said. Every day I spent in that cave was a nightmare and a constant reminder of the monster that I created. I'm tired of living with the guilt, and I'm tired of living with the shame. But you could save me from that misery. You could save me from an eternity of pain. The fairies and the witches screamed as Xanthos' shield buckled under the Snow Queen's steady blast. In just a few moments, they would all be obliterated. Bristol knew what she had to do. I will never forgive myself for this, she cried. There's nothing to be forgiven for, Madame Weatherbury said. Ending the Snow Queen is the only way to save you and your friends. Just lower your wand and all of this will go away. Lower your wand and finally I will be at peace. Bristol was sobbing so hard that her entire body was shaking. I love you, Madame Weatherbury. I love you too. It took every ounce of strength in Bristol's body to keep her wand up, but every ounce of willpower to lower it. The wand gradually fell to her side and the bubble disappeared around the Snow Queen, and the witch was consumed by the dragon's breath. While the Snow Queen burned alive, her blood-curdling screams echoed for miles. However, as the witch was incinerated, Madame Weatherbury had never looked so serene. The fairy beamed with gratitude and exhaled peacefully as all the guilt, shame, and pain lifted from her spirit. Madame Weatherbury spent her final moments watching Bristol and the fairies with a loving gaze and a proud smile. You all are my greatest dreams come true, she said. And like a beautiful rainbow after a long storm, Madame Weatherbury slowly faded from sight, and when the dragon finished her fiery attack, not a single trace of the Snow Queen or the fairy remained. Bristol dropped to her knees and wept uncontrollably. The fairies and the witches gathered around Bristol, but they couldn't stop their own grief from surfacing as they comforted her. Following the Snow Queen's demise, Xanthos and Skylene worked together using streams of warm water to melt the ice covering Chariot Hills. By sunrise, the whole city had been defrosted, including the Righteous Emperor and the Righteous Brotherhood. Tangerina, Emeralda, Sprout, and Mrs. V enjoyed putting the clansmen in shackles made from emeralds, honey, vines, and tablecloths. Once the clansmen were restrained, Dr. States and the Magbots marched the men across the crumbling town square and locked them away in the prison that they themselves used to run. While the clansmen were taken into custody, the alchemists cleaned up their battered institute and examined the wounded. Dr. Snett checked on Ryder's concussion and made him count fingers and walk in a straight line. Dr. Stagg bandaged the cuts covering Kitty's body and stealthily managed to take a sample of dragon's blood while she wasn't looking. The witches swept the army of the dead's remains into one giant pile, and Stitches even pocketed a few skulls for her private collection. Honestly, I support Stitches in that. Everyone was doing their part to clean up after the battle, but Bristol hadn't moved since the Snow Queen was slain. She stayed seated on the ground and silently stared at the spot where the witch had been incinerated. Bristol prayed with all her heart that part of Madame Weatherbury had survived the Snow Queen's death. She hoped that at any moment she would see the fairy rising from the ashes, but she never returned. Well, this week has been kicking the tail feathers, Lucy said. I don't know about you, but I'm going to take a much-needed vacation after all this. Lucy sat on the ground beside Bristol, but she didn't look up. You did the right thing. You know that, right? She said. Did I? Bristol asked. Yeah, of course you did, Lucy said. You saved our lives. If you hadn't lowered your wand, the Snow Queen would have killed all of us, and God knows what she would have done after that. Then why do I feel like a murderer? Bristol asked. Lucy put her arm over Bristol's shoulders. It's because you're a good person, Bristol, and good people can find guilt in a salad if they look hard enough. Lucy laughed. I know it's difficult to process now, but Madame Weatherbury sacrificed herself to save you, and that's the truth. This was her choice, not yours. And if I have to remind you of that every hour of every day for the rest of my life, I will. Thanks, Lucy, she said. You're welcome, she said. And for what it's worth, of all the people I know who've been forced to let a fire-breathing dragon incinerate the magically detached body of their former mentor, you're handling it the best. A small smile came to Bristol's face. Yeah, I suppose you're right, she said. Madame Weatherbury did give me a gift, and it would be an insult to her memory if I wasted all of that on guilt. Atta girl, Lucy said and patted her on the back. Thanks to Madame Weatherbury, our adventures are just getting started, and we'll always have her to thank for that. Without warning, the town square began to rumble with the intensity of an earthquake. The ground cracked and separated as the opening of the tunnel appeared in the middle of the city. The fairies and the witches gathered around the mysterious tunnel and peered inside. It seemed to stretch for miles underground with no end in sight. The demons walked through the capital and lined up the tunnel's entrance. As a demon passed by Xanthos, they waved their hand over the wall of the righteous palace and burned a message into the bricks. Time to go home. I guess that's my cue, Xanthos told the other. I can't believe we're friends with the heir to the demon throne, Tangerina said. Yeah, who would have thought, Skylene said. My father always said a boy like me would end up burning with the demons, but I don't think he thought I was going to get to rule them, Xanthos said. Are you sure you want to live with them? Emerald asked him. I mean, like, couldn't you rule the demons remotely? Xanthos smiled as he watched the demons head down the tunnel. I'm actually looking forward to it, he said. Look at them, Em. I found another world that loves and accepts me just how I am. How lucky is that? The only difference is this one really needs me, and I think part of me has always needed them too. We're gonna miss you so much, Bristol said. Have fun being king though, buddy, Lucy said. And don't forget to write, Mrs. V said. I want to know what the demons wear, what they eat, and if there are any eligible demon bachelors my age down there. Don't worry, I'll tell you all about it when I come back to visit, he said. I promise. Xanthos gave each of his friends a good tight hug goodbye, and when he said goodbye to the fairies and the witches, he noticed Elric sulking near the tunnel. So, I guess this is farewell, the elf said. The boys exchanged a bittersweet smile, not knowing what to say. It doesn't have to be, Xanthos said. You could always come with me. Elric laughed like he was joking. No, I'm serious, Xanthos said. We could roll the demons together. You know, I need someone to help me down there. You want me to come with you to the center of the earth? The elf asked. I mean, unless you wanted to go back to the elf territory. No, of course I don't. I don't want to go back to the elf territory, but won't I burn down there? Xanthos offered Elric his hand with a sweet smile. I control the fires now, he said. I can protect you. Elric smiled from ear to ear as he considered the offer, but it didn't take him long to decide. The elf eagerly took the fairy's hand and followed the demons to their new home in the center of the earth. The fairies and the witches waved as Xanthos and Elric walked deeper and deeper to the underground. Once they were out of sight, the tunnel sank into the dirt and disappeared. After the boys were gone, the fairies and the witches looked around the ravished town and the damaged Alchemy Institute, and they collectively sighed. What a dump, Lucy said. It looks like a group of children's stars threw a party. Yeah, it's going to take months to clean this place up, Bristol said. Ryder and Kitty turned to one another with matching grins, thinking the same thing. Actually, we might be able to help with that, he said. Although the Caretaker Supreme was furious with her son for entering the Temple of Knowledge against her will and livid that he had taken a dragon outside of Dragon Keys without her permission, she was very proud to learn that her son's disobedient efforts had helped save the world. Ryder and Bristol told her about the damage that the Army of the Dead had inflicted on Chariot Hills and the Alchemy Institute, and they convinced the Caretaker Supreme to loan them the Great Albino Dragon. 6 days later, after the dragon had consumed the city and the campus in its restorative flames, the capital was as good as new, and the institute returned to its usual location over the Southern Sea. As a thank you for saving them from the Army of the Dead, Dr. States invited Bristol to the Alchemy Institute for tea. The alchemist was particularly excited to show off the new residents of their biology department. Bristol peered into the cell next to Carol, the common cold, and found the disgraced righteous emperor pouting on the floor. We're calling him the hate virus, Dr. States told her. We thought the biology department was an appropriate place to keep him. That way we can make sure that he doesn't spread just like all the other contagious microorganisms. Yeah, that's perfect, Bristol said. Where did you decide to keep Immortalia? Oh, she's in the anthropology department with the other relics, Dr. States said. Dr. Stage is very excited to have living history in his possession. Oh, guess that's a win-win for everyone, Bristol said. Seven rolled his eyes at her enthusiasm and let out an aggravated groan. What have you done to my empire? He griped. Oh, I'm afraid it's not your empire anymore, Bristol said with a cheeky smile. The throne is being passed down to your heir. Heir? Seven scoffed. I don't have an heir. Of course you do, Bristol said. Remember your cousin Penny Charming? Seven's face burned bright red. Mousy little Penny is going to be the empress of the righteous empire? He sneered. Oh, good heavens, no, Bristol said with a laugh. Penny is going to be the queen of the charming kingdom. And she's decided to change the empire back to a kingdom, and given what her poor citizens have been through, she's also changing the name to something more cheerful. That means your stupid, gangly brother is going to be, yes, the king consort. I know, isn't that exciting? Poor Barry's been a nervous wreck since he found out. As a matter of fact, Penny's coronation is this afternoon, so I must be on my way before I'm late. I'll walk you out, Dr. States said. The alchemist escorted Bristol out of the biology department, leaving Seven alone with his grievances. And as Dr. States and Bristol walked down the floating path of the Institute, Bristol reached the satchel over her shoulder and removed the book of sorcery. Before I go, I wanted to leave you with this, she said. Dr. States was surprised by the offer. Are you sure you want us to keep it? He asked. Oh yeah, I think it's better off with you, Bristol said. There are spells in those pages that no one should ever have access to, and we cannot afford for the book of sorcery to fall into the wrong hands. There are a lot fewer hands up here than on land. Dr. States seemed touched by the gesture of confidence. We'll guard it with our lives, he said. Before you leave, I would like to extend an apology to you and your friends. For what? She asked. We were wrong to blame Mr. Hayfield for the fires, just like our ancestors were wrong to blame the dragons in the past, he said. We've also been wrong to turn a blind eye to tyranny and ignore the dictators like the righteous emperor. Had we interfered sooner, we may have prevented his attack on our institute. It's been an unfortunate but necessary wake-up call for us. Fortunately, though, through it all, it's forced me and my colleagues to recognize the science that we've been neglecting. A science, proper care and attention will guarantee that we make better decisions in the future. And what science is that? Bristol asked. The science of mistakes, Dr. States said. One mistake can teach you just as much as any experiment, and perhaps the biggest mistake the alchemists have made over the centuries is forgetting to include compassion in our analysis. Humanity may have its flaws, but distancing ourselves from the world hasn't been as beneficial as we thought. In many ways, we've forgotten what it means to be human. But we'd like to change that. Oh, I'm glad to hear it, Bristol said, although I'm not sure that I can fault you for your views on humanity, at least not right now. Oh? The alchemist asked. Sorry, I don't know what it's doing. When we were in the Temple of Knowledge, we saw something in the Sorcerer's Vault that was disturbing, she said. It was called the Halls of Humanity. There were 5 corridors, and each one held a living representation of the current dreams, nightmares, ideas, love, and hatred of all of humanity's experience. And sadly, the Hall of Nightmares and the Hall of Hatred were the fullest. Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. Yeah, well, it was a shock to me, Bristol said. It's haunted me ever since we left, and that's why I've decided to devote the rest of my life to changing it. The alchemist chuckled. You plan on changing humanity all on your own? No, not alone, she said. Before we left the temple, the sorcerer we met with was adamant that we take something from the vault. And since the book of sorcery was no longer there, I decided to take the one thing that I knew could change humanity for the better. Dr. State's eyes grew wide with curiosity. What did you take? He asked. The Hall of Dreams, Bristol said. I've seen how easily the world can change with just a touch of kindness. Humanity isn't a cruel species, and it isn't destined to self-destruction. They just haven't had enough good examples to inspire it. They need someone who will champion their ideas, someone who will encourage their ambitions, and someone who will nurture their vulnerabilities. And hopefully, with the Hall of Dreams, we'll be able to spread so much joy and light, and the people like the Righteous Emperor will never rise again. It's quite a goal that you've set for yourself, Dr. States said. Well, even if I can't do it, perhaps I'll inspire someone who can. I admire your devotion, but I am too skeptical, the alchemist said. I suppose that's why you're the fairy godmother, and I'm not. Yeah, well, everyone can't save everything, Doctor states, Bristol said. You worry about the planet and I'll worry about the people. Ah, now that's a goal I can get behind, he said. The fairy godmother and the alchemist shook hands and said their goodbyes. Bristol followed the floating path as it snaked through the Alchemy Institute and headed toward the landing strip at the front of the campus. There, Ryder and Kitty were waiting to take Bristol home. Tick, tick, tick. Bristol suddenly stopped in her tracks, an unexpected silence. All she heard was the ocean breeze as it whistled through the towers and the spires of the Institute, but her pocket watch had stopped ticking. It was quite a shock. She opened the watch and was amazed to see the gears had finally stopped turning, and yet Bristol was still standing. Madame Weatherbury's sacrifice had worked. The enormous smile grew across Bristol's face and her eyes filled with happy tears. What are you smiling about? Ryder asked her. I just realized I have the rest of my life to look forward to. Ryder helped Bristol aboard Kitty and the dragon soared into the sky. Soon the Alchemy Institute disappeared from view and all they could see for miles and miles around was the sparkling ocean and a sea of fluffy white clouds. Bristol beamed brightly while she admired the beauty surrounding her. You doing okay back there? Ryder asked. I'm great, she replied. However, Bristol was much better than great. As she flew through the picturesque sky, enjoying the wind blowing through her hair and the sunlight warming her skin, Bristol was consumed with an exhilarating feeling of happiness, excitement, and eagerness all at once. It was a familiar sensation, but she had never been more grateful to feel it. Bristol was alive. The end. Well, right, yeah, I wanted to know so much more, but I get what he's doing, right? Like, I get it. I want to know if Ryder is the twins' grandfather. I want to know so much. I want to know so much. Ah! But it's okay. We can be content with the beautiful ending we received. I know, Sloth. Please, you don't have to tell me we need more. I know, I can't believe it's over either. I just have so many questions, you know? Like if he ever does a talkback, I'm gonna be like, excuse me, I have a list of questions here. Can we go through them from A to Z? And he's gonna be like, who are you and why is she crazy? Can we please call the guards? And I'll be like, no, please, I love you. I need you to answer my questions. Yeah. All right. Wow. All right. Well. What can you do? Right? What can you do? We need to, yes, but also I have so many questions for him. I need him to do a talk back. I need him to do a signing and also like a talk back, you know? Well, we've already read The Land of Stories, Roxy, so I've already read through that whole thing. Yeah, it was really nice. I wonder what the experience is like for any kids or anyone who reads the Tale series before the Land of Sorcery series. I mean, the Land of Stories series. I wonder if anyone's read them in that direction. Oh yeah, you should definitely do it. It's interesting though, because we did it in the order that they were written, not in the order that they take place. I feel like I'm very excited. I know, so many questions, right, Amanda? I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, this was wonderful. He's gonna be the top of the list for me for the rest of forever. It's gonna be hard to beat. I wish that he had a TikTok so we could all tag him in something and be like, excuse me, I need you to answer some questions, but he's not on TikTok, so yeah. Well, we're starting his other book tomorrow, so hopefully that will be just as fun for us as these were. I know it's a different world, but it's still his writing, so hopefully it will just be just as exciting. I know it's gonna be hard for us to change over, but you know, that's the whole kit and caboodle. It's the whole kit and caboodle. It's really beautiful, and I will see you all tomorrow morning for a new book. We can do it together. Just a reminder, there will be no Slime Live tonight because I am going to a show tonight. We should send him a video of like a little clip of each of us being like, please, we need answers. We need answers ASAP. Sir, we need them. But yes, I'm going to Peter Pan tonight to see Kurt, and I cannot wait for that. And other than that, we'll be back tomorrow morning and we'll do it all over again.